Does anyone else like when your favorite game gets a brand new patch and it's amazing? Well, that's what we've got today. Early this morning, Dune Spice Wars devs posted that it's patch day, much to everyone's surprise, since we had no information whatsoever that they were even working on a patch or when it would happen. And then, like an hour later, they updated the game, and boom, we are on Spice Wars Community Update number 3, and it has done a huge amount of really cool things. Fixed a bunch of stuff that was terribly broken, made some balance changes. It's great. Let's talk about it right away. I'm so excited. Hey everybody. Community Update 3 is now live. Number 1, Spectator mode. Multiplayer lobbies can allow up to 8 spectators, and eliminated players can keep watching the game as spectators. This is huge. This is so good. Well, it's huge for me, right? Maybe the average person doesn't care as much, but for me, I'll be able to spectate games. People will be able to cast other players' games. We always had these weird janky workarounds where, you know, if we were trying to spectate, we'd have all the players jump into like a Discord room and then mute the commentators, and then we can kind of jump between their Discord views. It was a mess. It was really hard to get working. Now we've got native spectator mode. So excited. It's going to be really cool. It'll allow us to do fun things like spectate and commentate on tournament matches and tournament finals games, and just have a much higher quality of content available. Should be super cool. I'm very excited about it. Rework to pillaged sietches. This one I'm not as excited about. Let's see. Fremen can no longer build in a devastated sietch, though it's unclear if they could build in a sietch before, and if the buildings will be gone when the sietch is devastated. I don't know that yet. However, they can repopulate sietches for a large cost to remove the devastated trait, and then to compensate, they have one more building slot in their main base, forming a 1 district slot. That's great. We've always wanted that. And then the eligibility condition for Dune governorship has been revised to account only for non-devastated sietches. 1/5 of the map. You didn't see a lot of Fremen governor play, but it seems like it'll be easy to stop. I guess we'll see how expensive it actually is. Now, I haven't tested any of this yet. I've only read the patch notes and talked with people about them and just been really excited. So we'll see how this goes. It's kind of interesting. We'll see how much it costs, right? Overall, I'm neutral on this. Don't care too much. Assassin UX rework. UI has been improved with additional information on what you're supposed to do. A new option, Assassination Tips, will help with learning assassination mechanics. And the Imperial Intelligent Lands Radar resolution that allows cell searches now works properly. You can prepare cell searches and also use them in your territory. That's all good things. Assassination was a very opaque mechanic. In fact, it's one of my absolute most popular videos that I've ever made is just the assassination video of explaining how it works, because it's virtually impossible to figure out on your own. You can only learn how to assassinate from like community crowd wisdom, right? So maybe people will be able to self-serve some assassination information. You won't have to go looking on YouTube videos for it. That's a good thing. Spaceship balancing. All spaceships' cost, stats, and traits have been balanced to make them worth the cost without being overwhelmingly strong. It remains to be seen if the second part of that statement is true, but we like stuff being reworked. Previously, all spaceships just cost so much guild favor or were so niche in their applicability that basically no one ever used them. So big changes here, and it'll remain to be seen if they're actually useful or not, but Hawks went from 30 down to 9 guild favor. They cost 1/3 as much guild favor. Twice as much attack speed, but lower power. So these will be reasonably cheap, super fast, anti-squishy units. Now that's tricky because the squishy units are usually the ones that are able to shoot back at Hawks, and Hawks themselves are pretty squishy too. We'll see. Could be fun. Remains to be seen. That's a super high DPS, 10 to 20 attack speed. I don't think anything in the game is 20 attack speed. That's like twice as fast as the fastest attack there is. It'll be huge DPS if something has no armor, but I don't know, we'll see. And the Kraken, their flagship, can now only attack ground units. That's weird. I don't know why that's there, but okay. Harpies, this is the Harkonnen ones, also made super cheap, also buffed up. Trait change to attack in a small area and executes enemy units under 80 health. Could be interesting. Enemy units under 80 health. That's a pretty small margin. I don't know if that will be useful, because the Harkonnens already have so many other good troops, but I don't know. That's fine, we'll see. Overlord can only attack ground units, so that's a nerf, but not the one I would have expected. Overlord is really the premier flagship in the game. The ability to send its stings to suicide into something and blow it up, that's incredibly strong, and apparently unchanged. I definitely would have nerfed that if it was up to me. But Overlord's, even not being able to attack flying units is going to be great, but it does mean you might be able to bully it off with some flying units. Unless the enemy has lots of gunners, which he probably does, because gunners are great. Oh well, let's keep going. Banshees can attack ground and air units. I think previously they were maybe only air units. They've been made a lot cheaper, still a little expensive at 15, while these other ones dropped to 9. So Banshees are the smuggler ships. They got a decent buff up to a respectable amount of health. They lost some power. They went up to more fuel and command points. So pluses and minuses for the Banshees. And the trait changed from 2 cannot be seen out of combat, so permanent stealth, and the target suffers minus 50% speed and attack speed. That's super good. Banshees might be really good. I don't know. Their power has gone down a fair bit. They are still going to be pretty amazing at killing ornithopters, which is always the funniest use for them. But now they can attack ground units too. Banshees potentially good. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some roaming packs of evil Banshees. They're going to be nightmares to deal with, sniping your spice harvesters and your ornithopters and flying around just being incredibly annoying, which is really what snipers do best. Or not snipers, smugglers do best. Be annoying. The Spire is the Fremen ship, made drastically cheaper, just 6 spaceship parts, a big boost in health, but still a very low health. A huge decrease in power, but an increase in attack speed. Trait change to plus 50% damage against enemy units outside of their territory. So this again is a harassing air unit. I could maybe see some use for it. We'll see. It seems 20 down to 8 power is pretty drastic. So again, it'll be really bad against stuff with armor. But yeah. We'll see. That power change feels too drastic to me, but maybe the 50% here makes up for it. Well, it remains to be seen, but I'll give them a try. We'll see if we'll actually use them or not. But regardless, they're so cheap. 6 spaceship parts is nothing. 8 Solari upkeep is nothing. So, they might be worth experimenting with a little bit. Altar, which is their flagship, can now only attack ground units. I think it seems like all flagships can now only attack ground units. So you can hunt and maybe bully flagships with your own air units or anti-air units better now. Hammers are the Corrino ones. Now, this has me a little concerned because hammers were already pretty good, and they've made them hugely cheaper, from 40 down to 12 guild favor. It might be viable again. They buffed their health. They made them cheaper to upkeep. It might be viable again to have a big old mass of hammers that just fly around and punish things. This was true in a patch like 6 months ago, before the Heroes of Dune. Hammers were so strong, people could make just like 12 of them, and they would just annihilate almost any army. And if they weren't annihilating the army, they could just fly away to safety. I would hate to see that happen again, but there's some potential here. Hammers look really good to me for Corrino. Kronos can now only attack air units. It can't attack ground units at all. This is the Corrino flagship, so different from all the other flagships that can only attack ground units. Kronos can only attack air units and got a health increase. The Siren is the Ecaz fighter ship, made way cheaper, got buffed up health, got power hugely nerfed down, cheaper upkeep, trait change to small AoE, and damaged enemies deal less damage on their next attack, and this can stack. 10 power is garbage, but this is sort of an interesting trait. Might be fun to play with, but it doesn't excite me too much. Monument, their flagship, can only attack ground units, and Spirit are the Vernius ships, which I don't think anyone has ever built except by accident. These got a power increase, but an attack speed decrease, a big health increase. Trait changed, always tethered, and in truced territory, they get stealth and damage, and a big damage reduction. these could be good. 18 power is enough to actually hurt things, even if they've got armor. 3.3 attack speed is pretty slow, but it's like a heavy hitter kind of speed. It's like as fast as a sniper or something. Spirits might be okay. I could see some use for that. Especially being stealthed in your own territory and having damage reduction might make them pretty good to be able to really harass anyone that's coming into your territory really strongly. All right, let's go. General balancing. Defense breaches do not stack anymore. This is probably the #1 issue we had from at a high level of play. Several months, I don't know, 1 month, 2 months back, people figured out that defense breaches stack. So defense breaches are the operation that you put on someone else's main base that makes it take more damage. So if you wanted to kill someone and all 3 players that were against them coordinated and all used their defense breaches at once, you could just delete bases from the game. In fact, 3 players could make a nukes, and they could all defense breach and they could all nuke, and then that base is just instantly gone. That player's out of the game, which is not super fun for that poor player that was briefly in the lead before he was nuked out of the game. So this is a great change. This will make it so you can actually have a chance of defending your base again. You might be a little more resilient to getting sniped out when people turn against you. I love this change. Main bases detect stealth units at very long range. This is also great. This makes it much less likely for Fremen to run an army right up into your base without you having at least some knowledge of it. It makes it much less likely for the Smuggler Free Company, that were the premier base sniping army, to be able to just stealth right up to your base and then blow it away. At least you'll see them coming now and give you a little more time to react. That's great, I love it. Landsrad units from Judge of the Council are made basically 50% cheaper. That's good. These were always pretty good units, but nobody made them because they were so expensive. EMP bomb spying operation got a big rework. Minus 50% attack speed to mechanical units, missiles, batteries, and main bases. So it slows the attack speed of mechanical units and missiles, and it slows the movement speed slightly, not 50% anymore. And it took away the minus 50% power debuff. So it's still a pretty bad debuff, but it's no longer the instant death sentence to Vernius that it once was. So this is a huge Vernius buff from what I see it. Nobody ever used it for anything but against Vernius, and it'll be decent now as an attack speed reduction to military bases, missile batteries, and main bases. We might see that. We might see some of that on just missile batteries, but missile batteries are nerfed as well. Wait and see. Gear switching or removal. This is your gear in the armory. It used to cost 1,000 to change it from one to another, but now it's only 500. That's cool. It allows maybe really savvy players to switch gear around between fights if you're fighting different factions, different unit comps. Makes it a little better. I like that. This is a big one. Border defense development. This used to be very overpowered. It now still adds +1 missile battery limit per village. It no longer it no longer adds armor as much. It adds half as much armor to militia, and it no longer powers up the missile batteries by 30% more. So you can still build 2 missile batteries, but they're not super missile batteries, and it doesn't also supercharge your militia there as well. Border defenses was really bad to fight into. If someone had 2 or 4 missile turrets fighting, it was basically impenetrable or just a nightmare to fight into. So it'll be a little more reasonable to deal with now. I like that, a bit of a nerf to border defenses. Good, we're happy. This is a huge one. Main base building research center now does 20% knowledge, like I think it used to do. Now does plus 20% hegemony gain from spice tax and daily gains only. No longer is plus 15% hegemony from all sources. This is gigantic. So what does this mean? It used to be people would build this right at the end of the game when they're trying to boom or inflate their hegemony totals to the amount they needed to win. So you would destroy your research center so it looked like you didn't have that much hegemony, and then you would build it right when you were about to win, and the 15% happened retroactively on the territory that you controlled. So if you controlled 1,000 hegemony worth of regions and special regions, as soon as you built this research center, it gave you 1,500 free hegemony on top of what you had. So this was a way to hide or like artificially inflate and boost your hegemony and they've taken that away. I do think it's probably a mandatory first or second build now, just because the 20% gain from spice tax and daily gains is huge. So plus 20% hegemony gain from spice tax means that every 20 days you get an extra 200 hegemony. So it's an extra 10 hegemony a day. So it's basically a little more than a craft workshop, and it only really works if you build it early on in the game. So I would build research centers all the time, and no longer do you have to destroy them, but no longer do you have that end game boom anymore, straight to a hegemony victory. You can still do a bit of a boom by, sneaky capping and things, but the research center was a critical piece of that. So I think we're going to see really, really violent end game states, because people are going to climb towards victory but not have that sprint to get over the victory line. It's going to be like a much slower, more inexorable push towards victory. Or not inexorable, or people are just going to come and murder you if you look like you're going to win. So I think this is a big boost for people who are in second place or in third place, who are not going to be the target of everybody. It's going to make it a lot harder to clinch victory from being in the first place. It's a great change, I think. I think a lot of people have been clamoring for a nerf to hegemony gameplay, and this is it right here. AI in multiplayer games now never offer trades outside of their team and are more reluctant to accept trades. That's probably a good thing. Atreides, let's talk faction changes. Troopers got a 50% buff to the power. This is their main infantry unit. If under the effect of at least one allied bonus, is a slight buff to troopers. That's okay. We've got a slight nerf to rangers with power, with their automated weapons upgrade. Very slight, almost unnoticeable, but I don't think people were even necessarily using that too much. Support drones got a little buff in their cost. This is a big one. Peaceful annex no longer possible on devastated villages. Whew. So it used to be someone could pillage a village, and someone could pillage a village, or a player could die. And as soon as they do, their land becomes devastated, and no one else can take that until the devastated timer finishes, which is like 10 to 20 days or something like that. Except the Atreides could begin peaceful annexing it right away, so they could start doing their sneaky annex on territories that no one else could touch, which led to them being super strong if a player had been eliminated, or led to not having a lot of counterplay to the Atreides being able to peacefully annex stuff. Now you can conceivably keep them from peacefully annexing something by pillaging it, which is a nice buff to the likes of Harkonnens or Smugglers or any sort of pillaging heavy faction. Veteran militia development. Minus 15% damage inside territory. I think this was reduced. I think this was 20 or something. So this is a bit of a nerf to how much the militia are boosted in health, and a huge nerf to how much the militia have power. So the Atreides militia will still get buffed, but no longer buffed straight up to invincible Terminator levels. That's a good thing. That always felt pretty oppressive. Proud Liberator. This was a super strong tech that added tons of hit points to the Atreides, and it got a huge nerf. It used to be you could get up to 500 standing, and that provided, 2% for every, so it was 8% for every 100. So it was up 40%. You used to be able to get a max of plus 40% hit points for all your units. And now it's 5% for every 100, so it's a max of 25% hit points. So that's a big nerf. That's a 15% hit point nerf to the Atreides units. Probably a reasonable one. The Atreides endgame were just monsters. This is still good. I would still get this, but it's no longer the Atreides Terminators that won't ever die. That's a good thing. Units liberating or annexing a village from a faction with less standing heal for free, that's no big deal. We don't care about that at all. Sustainable spying. Agents assigned to Chome Landsguard and Spacing Guild produce 100%. No longer, it was nerfed in half. Now they only produce plus 50% of their associated resources. This was something you used a lot, especially with Thurfer Hawat, to get lots of bonus resources for their agents. Still okay, but nerfed down quite a bit. Agent traits present only once on an information field, apply their effects twice. Okay, that's always what it did, I believe. Dr. Wellington Yui got a bit of a buff, plus 5% hit points for units. Huzzah, good job. All the Atreides counselors were good. Yui was already usable, and now he is even more. House Harkonnens, cheaper combat probes. Uman Kudu got a buff, making units recruit even faster. Iaken Nufud got a buff, plus from 5% to 10% attack speed per active Harkonnen operation. This is a pretty big buff. You're always dropping like three operations in a big fight. I think Nufud seems pretty viable for heavy combat. Survival of the Fittest gives this, which only stacks once, but has a much lower cooldown. That's no big deal. But this one is. I think Nufud's totally viable for a more military-focused Harkonnen build. I think the Harkonnens come out as big winners of this patch. They're going to be great. Smugglers, Staban Tuik got a bit of a nerf to -4 Solari instead of -5, or +4 Solari instead of +5 for neighboring headquarters. That's very trivial. We'll see if that moves the needle at all. A slight boost for Lingar Boot of +2 water. Lashan Hara now used to gain information if you traded intel to people, but now gains information if they do any trading with anyone. That's cool. Free information levels on people. Information levels in factions reduced 50% slower. It always reduced slower. I don't remember if it was 50% or more, but that's not kind of negligible. But now you gain 10 Solari and 1 influence per information levels in another faction. That's pretty big. That's a nice buff. It's going to be a lot of influence for smugglers. It does, I think it took away, I think she used to do intel as well, and she no longer does. So it is a big rework to her. This is nice, but maybe I missed the intel generation of it. We'll see. Some interesting change with the smugglers. Very minor, though. Fremen, big nerf to skirmishers. Skirmishers were mega powerful before, and they dropped down quite a bit. 7 to 5 is a small change, but when you start at 7, you can't afford to lose any power, so down to 5 is a big modifier. This is going to makes them really ineffective against anyone with armor. They'll still probably be okay at blowing up unarmored units in a blob, but no longer the one-shot nuclear weapon tossers that they used to be. This is probably a good change, but it might hurt the Fremen military a lot. We'll see. Mobile turrets can now have XP. The donkeys can level up. That's great. Everyone liked the donkeys, but are rarely used actually, despite being pretty good. Balance of spaceship parts looted from enemy vessels combined with cost changes. Spires are cheaper to produce. Oh my god, someone's messaging me. Close these windows. Ignore these. Ignore these messages. These are not for you. Combined with spires are overall cheaper to produce from destroyed enemy ships. I don't entirely know what that means. Shamoom got a buff of 3% to 4% upkeep. That's good for Shamoom. No one really used her before, but that's could be good. Could be good. We could see it. I could see people trying it out at least. Jamis got a big buff, a bunch more extra authority and extra damage outside of territory. Jamis was always pretty good, but Mother Amalo and Stilgar I think are still the best. Incite Rebellion from Mother Amalo got a buff to be a little bit cheaper. 50 authority still kind of hurts. You wouldn't ever really use this unless you were authority capped, but hey, 50 is better than 80. Not a lot of changes to the Fremen, so we shall see. House Corrino, huge changes. Not so much the artillery drones. Artillery drones made cheaper, which is weird because artillery drones were amazing, and this makes them slightly better. Still amazing. But this one, Princess Urgulan, now only affects villages neighboring a main base. So Princess Urgulan is the counselor that lets you double build structures. So if you had rare resources, you could build 2 processing plants on it. Well, now that only works if it's adjacent to a main base, which is, I think, a pretty huge nerf to House Corrino. They used to be able to grab stuff at least 1 jump away, maybe 2 jumps away from their main base, God forbid. And then, get double the value from those. And those, of course, are really expensive for them to grab authority-wise. But now, Urgulan's value does not extend to stuff further from the main base, making, I think Corrino, always a bit dependent on good map generation, is now maybe more than ever. Urgulan's probably still good, probably still your go-to choice for Corrino, but this is a huge nerf to her. We'll see how this plays out. That feels a little drastic to me. That's not where I would have gone with it. I would have made the double building intrinsic to House Corrino and then just given Urulon a brand new kit, personally. Yeah, we'll see. Zoom Garan, I think, just made Imperial Mandate have no cost all the time. This military units thing was what he already did. Yeah, it's whatever. Zoom's good. He might be necessary since the nerf to Urulon means House Corrino will probably always be behind in these days. We'll see. That's a pretty big nerf to Corrino, though. House Ecaz, big banner, cheaper war banners, big banner, buff to range of effect, but a big nerf here. Hero Whitmore Blood, which lets you make multiple champions. If multiple champions deal damage to the same unit, only the last champion to damage it will get a trophy. Huge nerf. Used to be you could make 3 champions with Whitmore Blood, and then those 3 champions would all hit a guy, and that guy dies, and you get 300 hegemony. Well now, no matter what, when you're killing guys, no matter how many champions you've got, you only get 100 hegemony. So I feel like this probably makes Whitmore the Frightful Champions Guild. Oh, this is +1. Interesting. So the skill makes your champions a lot tankier per trophy they had, but you're not going to get any trophies anymore. So this certainly didn't need to be nerf. I think it makes Whitmore almost unusable. Why do you care if you have 3 champions if only one can get the stuff from it anyways? It's a 3 champions now is a really modest gain to the amount of hegemony you get from battles. Meanwhile, 3 champions used to be a gargantuan game. And the other hero they had, Alessa, I believe, was always very, very good, but which was overshadowed by Whitmore's triple champion build. I think this pretty drastic nerf makes Alessa the go-to now. People are going to see how incredibly strong she is with defensive play. She's the one who gives you massive combat bonuses if you fight in or adjacent to regions with masterpieces built in them, which are, for the Ecaz, most regions. So Ecaz are going to become a really tough nut to crack playing with Alessa, but will no longer have that terrifying endgame gigantic hedge boom where they could farm militia or other armies and get thousands of hegemony from doing it. You could still get some hegemony with your champion, but not, 3 times less than you used to. Big nerf to Ecaz. We'll see. We'll see how it plays out, because I think Alessa is actually really good, and people playing her might unlock some new Ecaz strategies, but it remains to be seen. Ebo VIP, taking immunity costs 50% more, but taking immunity to good things pays out 30 instead of 10. So slight nerf, slight buff, and doesn't matter. That nerf is not bad enough. You're still going to take Ebo VIP every time in order to skip the really bad negative resolutions. Interesting change, but doesn't change anything about Ebo. You still take Ebo, I think, 100%. Vernius, massive buffs. 50 more health on fighting mechs. 50 is not a ton, but it's good. Fighting mechs are your tankiest frontline unit, so more health on them is more gooder. Railgun health is huge. This is plus 100, which is almost 50% more than they used to have. So railguns were your best DPS long-range sniper units, and now they're no longer fold like wet paper in a light breeze. That's great. Resonance drones is a slight buff and cheaper upkeep. That's great. We like that too. It's a good buff. 10k hegemony can now obfuscate a single research development. That was always the same, but now each knowledge point increases the production of other resources. Used to be 0.1 and now it is 0.2. That's probably good. That's 100% bonus in the amount of bonus resources you get from your knowledge, and you always wrote a knowledge, so that could be big. That could help a lot with your economy. Figure you used to get to around 60 knowledge, which would pay out about 6% more resource gain for all of your resources. But now it pays out 12%, which is nice. If you add roughly 5 or 6% more of all resources generated, and not really have to do anything different. That's good. That's a big buff. Physical wiring. This was their assassination tech. It unlocks assassinations. This is a buff and a nerf, but a pretty big nerf. infiltration cells adjacent to the neural node do not count the maximum of infiltration cells allowed has been removed. So this is what allowed you to have tons and tons of different infiltration cells set up on a player. With this now removed, you can only have 2, I believe, which is a massive nerf to Vernius's ability to assassinate people. But now any infiltration cells adjacent to your node give knowledge and Solari and intel per statecraft building in that village. That's actually a huge buff. Is it a flat +2 knowledge as well as Solari and intel per statecraft building? I think it's a flat 2 knowledge and then 5 and 1 per statecraft building. If it's +2 per statecraft building, that would be even better. I don't exactly know how that works out, but it's a ton more knowledge for Vernius, when Vernius likes their knowledge, but it really nerfs their ability to assassinate. Interesting. I think this is probably an overall nerf for them because they used to be the premier assassins in the game, and now they'll struggle with it. 2 cells are not that hard to deal with if you're on assassin defense, for sure. Automated defenses development. This is a big buff. So it always gave you 2 automated militia, but now neural nodes attack units in the region as rapid firing single target defensive buildings. So when you get automated defenses, it turns your neural nodes into super turrets. And then no longer is there the slow health decay per node collected. This was always almost unnoticeable, so that's fine that that's gone. And your neural node being a super turret, and I saw someone talking about this saying it looked really, really strong. So hopefully it is, because Vernius could use a bit of a buff on the defensive. I think this is probably a good change. This was weak before because it replaces the tech that gives people double turrets, but now it just gives you a free turret because you'll always have a neural node there. I like that. That's a nice change. Lobby quality of life. Players kicked from the lobby can't join again. Okay, good. Quick start can no longer be used in Canley. Okay. Bug fixes. Truces are no longer broken if the faction is captured by if the village is captured by another faction before the attack takes place. Good. There were always some weird interactions between people accidentally breaking truces when they didn't want to. Likewise, AoE damage no longer breaks truces. This is one I like a lot. Units are no longer eaten by a worm in a region protected by decoy thumpers. So it was always supposed to work like this, but it didn't necessarily. The idea is you'd see a worm coming to eat your army, you get those red exclamation points, whatever, right? And then you decoy thumper the region next door, and that should draw the worm away so your army doesn't get eaten. Well, it didn't always do that. Oftentimes, if the worm strike was imminent and you decoy thumpered, the worm strike still happened and you lost your army. Now, and I saw someone test this and they said it worked fine, so now this should work. I think the value of decoy thumpers through the roof. You can use them to properly protect your army from being eaten by worms, which is great. Fixed Landsred votes being blocked. I don't care. Next main building, no longer lost. Don't care. Let me see. Let me scan these. Don't care, don't care. This is a big one. Harkonnen red fluid gear no longer triggers during occupation. So this was an armory upgrade for Harkonnens that gave them a big DPS increase, but caused them to lose health over time while they were in combat. Well, no one ever used it because it still kicked in if you were sieging down a village. So you'd massacre the enemy army, and you'd go and you'd siege down their village, and while you're waiting to annex the village or whatever, your guys are all continuing to lose health until they get down to like 1 hit point. So it was really, really, really bad. No one used it. But red fluid in general was a good buff if that didn't happen. So this is a big buff for Harkonnens, I think. I think this applies really to their baseline trooper unit and their gunners. I think both have these. So that's a buff for the Harkonnens. Harkonnens get more better again. I think they're going to be the strongest faction coming out of this. Combat probes health is no longer reduced. Meh. This is a good one. Communication jamming from smugglers, which cancels other operations, now properly cancels defense breaches and administrative burdens, which for some reason didn't get affected by it before. So good. That makes it do what you would expect it to do. Drisk passive no longer applies stealth to units engaged in combat. Okay, good. Don't care about this. Don't care about this. This is a good one. Buildings in a destroyed Corrino main base no longer are prevented from being rebuilt. This is good. This is, I guess, a bit of a buff for Corrino. It used to be if Corrino dropped their second base, built all their districts in it, probably their red districts, and if someone later came in and destroyed that base, those districts are all destroyed permanently. You couldn't, like, rebuild them in your main base. So oftentimes this would be just a complete neutering of Corrino's ability, power. If you destroy all their red districts, they lose 10 command points and a ton of other, military capability. And if you couldn't rebuild those, then you just can't compete anymore militarily. So now you could go back to your last surviving main base and rebuild the critical things. That's good. Emperor's Monument now is deactivated if the development to unlock it is no longer active. Okay, I guess that matters with obfuscation. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. Is anything? Hidden Backdoor now works properly on enemy mechanical units. This is good. So Hidden Backdoor was the thing that Vernius had to turn enemy mechanical units against their owners. And it was always buggy and sometimes wouldn't work properly and their stuff would still shoot you. But now it looks like they fixed that to make it properly. You really do want those siege tanks to turn on the enemies rather than keep shooting you. Folder Relay can no longer teleport units to an invalid location. That's good. That literally happened to me in the last Vernius game I played. I used the Folder Relay to teleport my units and they flew off the map like a mile away and it took them like several days to walk back onto the map. I'm glad that won't happen again. Fix some bugs. Yeah, and that's it. That's the end of our notes. Ooh, it's a big one. It's got a lot of great stuff in it. I'm very excited to get in and play with some flyers and some mixed up, it's just some mixed up meta, right? It's possible that Vernius is really good now. They got a lot of buffs. They'll be militarily strong. They might be able to defend themselves and, God forbid, even project their military power out into the world. Wouldn't that be a thing to see? I'd say big nerfs to Corrino. If they get a good map layout, they'll be fine. They'll still be able to thrive. But in general, they're not going to be quite as resilient as they used to be. Economically, I suppose. They're going to struggle if they've got a map that doesn't support good base drop spaces and good territory around those. We shall see. Atreides, lots of nerfs, which are probably good. Nothing looked too overboard for me either. I think it all seemed perfectly warranted. So Atreides should still be good, but no longer super oppressive and invincible in the late game, where they've got twice as much hit points as everybody and take half as much damage. Spectator mode's going to be awesome. Some pretty big rework functionality around the pillage sietches. Remains to be seen how that affects the Fremen, and I think the Fremen army potency is greatly diminished by their skirmisher nerf as well. Remains to be seen how that works, but I think people were pretty bullish on the Fremen's capabilities prior to now. Yeah, I don't know what their win condition is if hegemony is harder than ever to get to, thanks to the Research Center nerf, which makes that endgame hedge boom much of a thing of the past. Boy, it's a whole new world out there. All right, let's wrap it up here. That is my patch analysis for our community update number 3. I think it's great. I think it's got a lot of really good stuff in it. It's very exciting. I think it should prompt a lot more interest into the game, and we'll be able to actually spectate stuff. I'll be able to cast games of other players. You guys no longer have to watch me say I'm going to do something and then forget to do it, or accidentally delete my army, so on and so forth. We can watch other players do that now and laugh at them. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see some more Dune content real soon.